Alright, first thing is centering the clay. We're just going to start right here from the beginning. When we're centering the clay, this is going to be one of the most, there's going to be more information on this demo than almost any other demo. When we're starting from the beginning, there's a lot of little things that you guys have to pay attention to, okay? So we'll just start from right when you sit down on the wheel. When I sit down on the wheel, I don't want to be really far back here, right? I can't, right? I'm not very sturdy if I'm like this. So when you sit down on the wheel, really, you want to be right up into the wheel, right? You want to get about as far up to the wheel as you can, right? Another thing is just the speed of the wheel, right? When we first sit on the wheel, the speed here, you don't want to go too fast, right? So you kind of want to get comfortable with this pedal, and at first, most of my students have a tendency to really just floor it, go full blast like you're in a car. But we're not in a car. We don't really, in the beginning stages, we don't really want to go above 50% power, right? And what I recommend is just getting about 50% power on the wheel, taking your foot right off the wheel and just leaving it, okay? So if you're having a hard time with the adjustment of the speed, just take your foot right off the pedal. You're going to go about half speed once you're working with the clay, and just leave it, right? Another thing is anchor points. Anchor points are a very, very important thing, right? Anchor points are using your elbows to anchor down into your body, right? When I do this, I'm a lot sturdier than if I were to try to center the clay like this, right? Anytime we're working with clay, pretty much in general, anytime, we're always anchor points, okay? So what I do, I get about 3 to 5 balls of clay at the beginning of class, and just get those out and set them on your wheel. I'm not going to put them right here just so we can see better with the camera, right? So now we have to talk about getting the clay stuck to the wheel head. And when we do this, we don't want it wet, but we want it just a little bit damp, right? When the wheel head gets sticky, that's the perfect amount of water in here. Right? So if it's completely dry, it doesn't stick as well, and if it's really wet, it's not going to stick at all. Just damp is perfect, okay? So it's my first ball of clay here. We're going to talk about the 3 main points of centering. 3 main points of centering are, 1, the speed. We already talked about that. We get about 50% power. Number 2 is anchor points, right? We already talked about that as well. Getting anchor points and just really getting in there and being sturdy. And the last thing with centering is always letting go slowly. Okay? I'm going to show you guys in this demonstration centering 3-4 times. Right? And the next one I'll talk about hand position, but for the first couple, we're just going to talk about these anchor points and the speed of the wheel. Okay? But my goal is to get it nice and centered right here. So 1, I got about 50% power, not full blast, I'm not going really slow. About 50% right about here is good. Okay? And then anchor points. Anchor down. If you look at my elbows, they're always down like this. Lastly, when I let go, I'm going to let go nice and slowly. And I have a centered ball of clay. Right? So this will be uncentered. Right? Our goal is to get it nice and centered, just like this. Alright, you guys are going to mess up. This is going to be a really frustrating assignment, actually. So every time you fail, just cut this right off the wheel. Right? Your clay is going to be a lot wetter than this, and just by working with it, it's going to get really wet. So anytime you mess up, you just make one of these, which we call a poo rainbow. Right? And we'll just poo rainbow. Alright, so we'll just set this aside. We'll deal with that later. And we'll grab another ball of clay and set this on. Your first assignment is to center 10 times. Right? Alright, so now let's talk a little, now that we know the speed is about 50%, we have anchor points and we're letting go slowly, we'll talk a little bit about hand position. Okay? Everybody's going to do this a little differently, and that's fine. I want you to watch anybody in my classes that has done this before and see what they're doing, ask them questions. So you kind of have to come up with what works best for you. I'll show you the 2 ways that work best for most of my students. Number 1 is the fist on top and using your palm on the side, right? You use your left hand to use the, right here to the side of the clay, right? And when I'm using anchor points, I can just use my body and press right into the clay. Okay? Also, then what I'm going to do with my right hand, I'm going to take it and make a fist and put it on top. Right? So my right hand goes into my left hand like this, and I press down. Down with my right hand, in with my left hand until it's nice and centered. Okay? And that's centered. If you have, and it's kind of doing it now, slow it down just a little bit, you'll see it better. It's kind of lumpy on the side. That means you're not pressing in hard enough with your left hand. So I'll press in harder with my left hand and then down with my right hand. Okay. A variation of this technique that works really well for most of my students is the karate chop on top, which you can do as well. Right? Our goal is to have a flat top, straight sides, with a little divot in the bottom like this. Right? Another way that works for my students, the second way, is to cup it. Both your hands on the sides like this and your thumbs go on top like that. And that works for students as well. No matter what you're doing with your hands though, you have these anchor points. Okay? If you're having a hard time with anchor points and not being able to get good anchor points, it most likely means that you're too far away from the wheel. Alright, once again I'm going to make a poo rainbow with this clay. So the function of the poo rainbow is just to let the clay dry out. Too far. Okay, so your guys' wheel, mine's nice and dry, and I can pretty much stick the clay right to it. But when you guys make mistakes and mess up, your wheel's going to look a lot more like this, where there's just water out of it. Right? Also, a lot of my students, they have a lot of water on their hands, and so their ball of clay gets wet, their wheel gets wet, and then I see them trying to put this down, and it won't stick. Right? So I see students trying to get it to stick, but this is not going to work. So just back up, take this clay off the wheel, make your poo rainbow. Right, at the end of class, or even at the beginning of class the following day, you can wedge this clay. So to clean this off, I'm going to take my card. Everybody should have brought in a card by now. Take the card and clean off the wheel. Also, I like to use my thumb as a squeegee. What I do, I just put the wheel full speed and I push down. I'm still using anchor points. And I clean off the wheel with my thumb. And that works even better than the card. Right? I also make sure that I wash off, I scrape off my hands before I grab my next ball of clay. Right, another trick to getting this stuck to the wheel head is simply pushing this down here, slapping it a few times, okay? Slapping it a few times, and then taking your finger and making this divot here. Now that's going to stick it to the wheel head much better. Right. Water, you're going to want it, anytime the clay starts getting sticky, you need to use more water. Okay. And then about 50% power, anchor points. Your pressure, as far as how heavy, how much pressure you're going to put on the clay is going to be the heaviest when you're centering. So you're going to be pushing pretty hard, but since you're using anchor points, you're kind of using your body to push rather than just pushing this in. Alright, so on this last piece of clay, we're going to talk a little bit about letting go slowly. And just to illustrate that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to push on this, do the exact same thing I've been doing, except I'm just going to let go quickly. And you'll see that that's no longer centered. The only thing I changed was I let go quickly. I see a lot of students do that, and it looks centered to them, and then once they take off their hands off the clay, it's no longer centered. Right? All I have to do is just let go slowly. Okay? Once again, I'm actually pushing it a little bit past center, and then if you let go quick, it's no longer in center. Notice also, my left hand here is cocked back like this, right? I'm cocking it back like that. that means that the pressure is going straight into the clay from my body. See a lot of beginner students that are doing this, right? Where they're taking their hand and they're trying to push it this way, but that's using a lot of muscles. And the goal is to try to do this without using a lot of muscle, right? Okay, so I'm putting my hand like this and just pushing straight into it. I also see one thing a lot of students do incorrectly is they're taking their right hand and they're not connecting it to their left hand. And when you do that, you'll see that it creates this dimple here. Okay, so just take your right hand and put it into your left hand. Okay, the very last thing we need to talk about is the shape. To get your 10 centers passed off, you have to pass off each one with me or an advanced student, right? It's your responsibility to keep track of those centers. So to pass those off, they have to be the right shape. If you make it this shape, it's centered, but it's not the correct shape, right? So it needs to be this shape, flat top, straight sides. If it's too high, it doesn't count, and if it's too low, it doesn't count either. And that's centering. Jim, you may turn off the